Hey guys, Rojimbo here, and today I wanted to show you guys the Micro Commander, the Emerson Micro Commander. Um, I've got another commander out here to show you kind of size-wise just how micro this thing is. Um, it's quite a bit smaller. The size difference from a full-size commander is your full-size commander comes in at 9 inches length overall, and your micro commander comes in at 7 and 3/16. So you can definitely tell it's a shrunk down version of your big ass commander. So does it translate when it's shrunk down like this, or does it kind of get weird? Because sometimes when you just shrink a knife, it doesn't always work. Um, and this is one of the cases where it kind of works and kind of doesn't in certain ways. So where doesn't it work? Let's start there. Um, I feel like having this large kind of guard, the way Emerson favors having these large guards in the on a full size commander. You can see it's almost exactly the same style of scale, same amount of large guard, but with this full size, your guard allows you to have your full hand on it, filling out along the ridge of the back of the knife here, kind of fitting into the meat of your hand, and just allows you to have that full hammer grip and still have plenty of guard up here. On the Micro Commander, you can get all four fingers onto that knife, just barely there. You are fully, nothing is hanging off, and you can get a good solid hammer grip, but it really does shrink into the palm here because again, having this guard pushes your hand further down on this knife, and while it has a pretty decent grip length, the size of the grip is 4 1/4. So you should feel like that's a solid size grip, but by putting this choil here or this guard, you're really talking about 3.5 inches of like effective grip for your four fingers. Now that said, it still fits well. It's still it's not a fail by any means, but it is a consideration that shrinking it down has kind of limited your grip. Now that said, it's a 3-inch bladed knife. You're not going to be trying to do the same things that you do with your full size commander with your micro commander. Your micro commander is really, at least in my usage, more of like a utility kind of back pocket utility knife. Whereas your full-size commander is, a little bit more of like a fighting blade and, utility and everything else, kind of a catch-all. But so as a utility knife, the Micro Commander works really well. I think you could fight with it if, your life depended on it. What happens is you kind of end up in more of a pistol grip. So see how this kind of like disappears into the palm, and you end up with this sort of saber pistol grip kind of effect, this sort of thing. I guess you can kind of clamp down on it, and it's definitely got enough like shape, and then the grip on the G10 is not going to come out of your hand. It does work pretty well in reverse as well. That actually feels way more natural than the other grip. So it's weird. It kind of wants to be a reverse grip knife if you were in a defensive type situation. But anyways, since none of us really do that too often, let's get back to the utility side of it. So from a utility standpoint, it works great. I have found that the recurve on this knife is just very effective at cutting through all sorts of stuff. Even when the edge kind of loses some of its hair popping sharpness, the fact that it has that S curve, that recurve, really kind of just keeps on accelerating material into it. Damn near cut myself there. It keeps on pushing and like pulling itself. You're constantly hitting a new angle. you guys know how recurves work, right? It's just at whatever place you're hitting along that curve, it's constantly accelerating the cut, and you're getting a better a more dynamic cut going. So yeah, I really like the recurve. I also really enjoy the fact that it's a fairly flat. You can see right up to about here is where the grind. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, that's where it turns into a flat all the way down to here. So you can do the same kind of like cutting, like if you're cutting food, you're cutting slices off of something, and then you want to push that across. You can, this thing will just perfectly line up like this, and you can slide stuff around on your cutting board. So I've found that's really useful. That's the same thing with your full-size Commander as well, but I have done a lot less like random utility with this XHD. This is it. I've had it for almost a year now, and it still is kind of a safe queen for me. I said that I didn't do that sort of thing, but enter a $600 or $800 knife, and turns out I do make safe queens out of certain knives. But anyways, yeah, I've had a lot of fun using this guy. I've had it, like I said, for about 3 months now, and I've just kind of put it through its paces. The recurves are a little bit harder to sharpen than your average, kind of just like full-bellied, kind of like Tiger or CQC8 style knife, or even a straight, like Tanto, like a CQC7 or something like that. But that said, it wasn't too bad when I did sharpen it. I just find it a little bit difficult to strop. Like, I'm not sure what angle I'm supposed to be hitting, but I'm kind of a novice at that stuff, so I wouldn't let that like put you off of it. I think that once you get the hang of sharpening knives like this, it's not so bad. At least that's what I've heard. Let's talk about deployment on it. So, as you can see, it does not have a thumb disc. It has a hole, a cutout hole, which is a little bit different, kind of more like the Karambit. And then, of course, it also has the wave. So if you're going to use the hole, it's not bad. It's a small hole, so you're not going to be able to get your thumb into it necessarily, but it gives you enough that you can actuate it and get it out. I've seen a couple other reviews on these micro commanders, and people have been kind of like a little unsure about this hole, and I will say it is not the most positive way to get it out. I feel like the hole gives you just enough to start to pop it, and then it's just the pressure of your thumb on the blade itself that is kind of letting you slide it out. That said, with a little bit of grease, a little bit of oil, and a little bit of loosening of the pivot, not so much that it's gone off center. You can see it's still centered. I can flick it. So that's kind of a nice thing for me, because that's my preferred opening method for most knives, is just flicking them. Flicking it, or of course waving it. Waving it being kind of like the sort of the most often used real life way of opening this knife, because again, this is sort of my utility knife. So I'm usually doing something, holding something. This comes ripping out of the back pocket, already snapped open and cuts. That said, it's fine to open, just gentlemanly roll out, or with the flick. So yeah, a number of different ways to open this knife. I'm not at all bummed about the action. When I first got it, it was very tight, but that's kind of common for most Emersons. So yeah, it just needed a little bit of loosening. Other notes about it, I will say the wave seems like shrunken. Like again, one of the things about just taking a normal Commander and then shrinking it down to a micro size is that they didn't adjust the wave to be larger, which I think they could have. I don't really see why the wave needs to be this tiny. If you compare it to something like a karambit, I mean, look at the size of the difference on that wave. It's much smaller and much more sharp. So yeah, I don't know, because I kind of like using the wave as the opening means a lot of times with my finger, you know, and that's not really something that you're not necessarily gonna be doing that with this, because again, it's just not large enough to, like, I do a lot of almost like a front flipper style opening with stuff like this, where I just like sort of roll it over the front. This being the CQC 14, and I also remove the disc on this, just so that way, again, this is a 3-inch blade. So if you've got a disc on there, you're taking your 3-inch blade and turning it into a 2.5-inch blade as far as like the cutting path goes. So that is one of the major advantages of having a hole versus a disc, is you fully maximize this 3-inch blade. Anything you get this knife into is going to slide right through and just do fine. So that is a bonus, having doing away with the disc. Just sort of gives you that extra cutting path. But again, they could have done with a bigger wave. You can see with the CQC 14 there, the size difference. It's just a much larger wave. So size-wise, let's compare between the 14 and this Micro Commander. You can see pretty big difference. In hand, you can definitely feel the difference. This, again, a little bit more kind of shrunk up, and then this is just that 14 is like a hand-filling, full-size handle, which is great. I do really love that. Although I'm not as big a fan of this straight blade as I am of this recurve. So this one ends up still getting more pocket time. There's also a pretty good reason to carry this as far as weight goes. So the weight on this is 3.88 ounces. So, an Emerson under 4 ounces is kind of an unusual thing. Of course, it's not going to be as lightweight as something like your Delica, but that's a Spyderco, and who carries those, right? No, I mean, you and I do probably, but it's interesting because if you do own a Delica, you'll know kind of exactly the size of this Emerson, because they are pretty much spot on the same length, same blade length. And actually the handle, if you look at this sweep along the back side of the handle, it's very, very similar to the sweep along the back of this Micro Commander. The big difference is going to be that guard. See how that guard kind of pushes your fingers down, so that this is now this 3.5-inch like span here is your effective blade or guard length or handle length, versus with the Delica, that entire length is for your hand. So it really does feel like you have a much bigger handle on the Delica. I mean, much thinner, but much longer handle than on your Micro Commander, which again just has a little more cramped feel. That said, I would way rather have this knife in almost any in any situation rather than the Delica. The Delica is just is delicate, right? It's in the name. They're nice, but they're it's a different knife for a different purpose. But it is kind of an interesting comparison, right? Looking at these two back to back, it's kind of like Emerson entered the 3-inch EDC knife game with this model. Now, that said, this model is something that you can't get all the time. This is one of the limited run offerings that Emerson does here and there when there's demand. So, unfortunately, you can't always pick up one of these Micro Commanders. That said, I think the Mini Commander, which is just a little bit longer, I think it's a 3.3-inch blade. I think the Mini Commander would probably be a better knife in general. I don't have one. The reason I wanted this Micro Commander was because it meets the 3-inch blade length requirement for kind of like open carry in my city. So that's why I went and jumped at the opportunity to get one of these Micro Commanders. But if I had my druthers, I'd honestly just be carrying a full size. But you know, I could see where if you wanted a smaller commander, and blade length was not an absolute requirement, I'd go with the Mini Commander, just because then you're still getting the thumb disc, which looks cool. I think it probably makes it a little bit more accessible. And I think that this handle, some of the cramped problems that you're having with the handle here, would just disappear with just a little bit more, you know? So maybe one of these days I'll pick up the Mini Commander and we can compare it. But anyways, yeah, that's the Micro Commander. For as many little tiny, you know, beefs as I have with it, I also really love it. And it has been my most carried knife lately in the past, you know, past few months since I've had it. Again, just because if I put something in my back pocket, I want to be able to pull it out and have it already open. So it needs to be able to wave out. I don't put any kind of zip tie mods on things like this. I think it looks cheesy and it doesn't work as effectively as a wave. And so, you know, if I'm going to be waving out something from my pocket and it needs to be a 3-inch blade length, you know, these are my options really. And I don't know. Again, I like the recurve better than this. So yeah, that's the Micro Commander. Here I'll put it next to a 7, just in case you have a 7, and that's a more apt comparison for you. But you can see it's quite a bit, you know, handles are perfectly aligned right there. You're missing a good 1/2 inch or more off the back of that. So, you know, and this I think would be a little bit more representative of the size of like a mini as opposed to a Micro Commander. But all that said, Micro Commander is a really nice knife. If the blade length is what you're looking for, and maybe the weight considerations, size considerations, this is just a really nice mini Emerson. It is much, much smaller than any of the other Emersons that I have. You know, even than the Karambit. Karambit looks massive compared to that Micro. So yeah, if you want a small Emerson that's going to just function really well, cut really well, and serve you well, I'd go with the Micro Commander. Definitely don't be shy. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be coming back at you with hopefully a video on the Quaken sometime soon. The Quaken has kind of been an interesting knife for me because I don't know, it's a sexy knife, but it has not kind of like taken its place in my daily rotation the same way something like the Micro has. So that's why the Micro is coming to you first. Anyways, hope you guys are doing well. I'll chat with you later. Rojimbo out.